eyes were on John Kerry when he sought to become the official guardian of a young Somali girl who had lost her parents. This is her final appearance after all these years. Too agitated to act like a gentleman, John Kerry pounded on the door behind him, in an effort to calm the rage building up in his chest. He clenched his jaw and ran his fingers over his face. John felt the want to return to the door he had just exited and hit something as he clenched his fists. To him, it seemed inconceivable that anyone could be so inflexible. Its adaptability was the glory of life, wasn't it? Back in the office, nobody gave a hoot about the future of a little orphaned girl. If they had, he wouldn't have to go through 1,000,001 hoops to adopt her. As he furrowed his brow, John examined the antiquated processes, his mind racing to find their purpose. To speed things along, he had politely inquired as to whether or not there was a method to avoid these procedures. A smile and an eye roll were the only responses he had received from the office boss. The father had told him with an arrogant shrug that he would not adopt a Somali girl unless he met every single one of the list's conditions. He didn't appear happy enough to tell John that. John found it difficult to see the rationale behind the protracted and unclear adoption procedure. To find out what, if anything, the administration was attempting to conceal. He looked inside himself. In their efforts to maintain a certain image, they were at a loss for words. Laughable red tape prevented even the most generous individuals from having the courage to adopt a child from the nation. As far as John could tell, this act shocked him. The nation was impoverished, and there were numerous children without parents to provide for them. Why didn't he just sneak up on the kid in the dark and whisk her away on a private plane? For some time, no one would have suspected anything. And even if they had, they might never have gone to seek redress for him. No nation would squander its resources on an individual who lacked political or economic clout. They were subjecting the valueless citizen to unimaginable hardship in order to formally adopt him. Local tour guide Yule was John's second stop. John was approaching Yule with fierce strides, and Yule was waiting outside for him. He immediately suspected that his goal had been unsuccessful, because John was so familiar with his homeland. Yule felt sorry for him. The Somali people may have been impoverished and in need of international assistance, but they were stubborn and unwilling to bend over backwards to help anyone, particularly an unscrupulous foreigner. John was informed by Yule that the office staff's hostile behavior was actually motivated by their desire for a bribe, though they would never say it outright. Their demeanor betrayed their true intentions. But John missed the hint as he was an outsider. It all clicked for him after hearing this from Yule. The formal procedure would take over a year to finish before an individual could adopt. But the expedited route that government officials would use would take less than 6 weeks. John planned his next move with his hands on his waist and a wrinkled brow. The little Somali girl, Aliyah, who he wished to adopt, was in the care of a respectable orphanage at the time. John personally had her placed there at Yule's recommendation. As John oversaw the adoption process, he sent a substantial amount of money to the orphanage to cover Aliyah's expenses. John never imagined he would have to submit to the demands of an unscrupulous government during his lifetime. But here he was, enduring immense hardship on behalf of a vulnerable child. John, being American, had never encountered anything like this previously. Because of his extensive travels, he became famous as a photographer all around the globe. On his adventures, he often captured remarkable and one-of-a-kind photographs. The world-renowned cultural and historical sites of Egypt's pyramids and Turkey's Pukul were both visited by him. The lakes of British Columbia, Mexico's Cave of the Crystals, and the Bermuda Triangle were all within his sphere of influence. Thanks to his extensive resume of achievements, he became well-known and highly esteemed in his field and across the globe. He received enormous sums from magazines, collectors, galleries, and museums in exchange for licensing his original photographs. Before John's life partner R.A. became sick, he was living it up to the fullest. She was his confidant and best friend, and she used to go on a lot of trips with him. Even though they came from diverse backgrounds, they had been inseparable since they were in junior high. R.A. was from a middle-class family, while John was born into affluence. His peers had seen him as the most promising and affluent student. In contrast, R.A. had supported her family with part-time jobs she held while in high school and had worked extremely hard in school in the hopes of earning a college scholarship. Thankfully, she had been awarded a college scholarship. They had been apart for 4 years, having gone to separate schools. After that, by some stroke of luck, they crossed paths again when performing independently abroad. John had spent no time in telling her how much she meant to him, and she had returned the sentiment. R.A. received the devastating news that he had a little window of time left to live. They had been slowly but surely preparing for their wedding as they worked to establish their careers and plot out their future. John still couldn't get Ra's diagnosis. He was distraught and felt completely helpless. According to the doctor, Ra's body was being attacked by an autoimmune condition for which there is now no treatment. With all his success and wealth, why hadn't he been able to rescue the one he loved the most? John remained in denial for weeks, utilizing every waking moment to contact medical institutions worldwide, imploring them to discover a solution for R.A. Regardless of the expense, R.A. had been discouraged seeing him crumble. In her final days with him, she pleaded with him to take her to all of her favorite locations, and she made a list of things she hoped to do with him. Nevertheless, John adamantly declined to accompany her, urging her to remain at home and recuperate until a remedy was discovered. He adamantly maintained that her life should go on. Worried about being alone without her, he sobbed into his pillow, while holding his hand tightly. She muttered, "It's okay. I don't hate you," on the day R.A. passed away. Right now. For our sakes. Live. Despite her frailty, she mustered up the strength to smile at him one final time before she closed her eyes forever. John found Ra's handwritten notes among her belongings after she was laid to rest. She laid out her plans for the distribution of her worldly goods in these letters. Her wishes were to have her belongings given to charity and for a large portion of her estate to be used for medical research. One of the poorest African countries, Somalia, was to receive the other half of her inheritance. A long-lost recollection sprung to mind for John as he read this. A hazy memory of him and R.A. plotting an African safari to the Serengeti remained. R.A. preferred to do something else, like visit a poor nation. But he still wanted to go because every photographer goes there at least once. After telling her it was discouraging, John shook his head and told her to put the trip out of her mind. He had assumed she grasped the concept, but it seemed she hadn't. He had learned that from her letters. John resolved to live up to her wishes and give them his all since he regretted not allowing her to enjoy her final days as she had wished. That is why he scheduled a journey to Somalia. On his initial day, He accompanied a local guide named Yul on a walking tour through economically depressed areas. As he had warned R.A., it was disheartening to see people living in such terrible conditions, with children suffering from malnutrition and wearing clothes that were in such bad shape. His heart felt like a heavy stone in his chest when he grudgingly clicked a few photographs for documentation purposes. He attempted to alleviate the pain by massaging the area with the heel of his hand. But his efforts were in vain. John wished he could just go back to his hotel. He felt compelled to keep firing because of an inner stirring. John was the type of guy that went with his gut because he knew it would lead to the best decisions. He found success and happiness through following his gut instincts when he captured the stunning natural beauty. John stopped every few steps to take a few pictures till he saw a tiny girl. It was as if time stood still when he snapped the shutter button. John could not tell the girl's original color from the dirt on her polo shirt when she sat on the ground. And she was only a year old. The most moving story was told by her small stature. John pondered the last time this child had access to basic necessities like food, water, and medical attention. The young woman appeared unable to handle such profound feelings as she sat motionless on the ground, her gaze fixed downward in utter sorrow. Just going with his gut. John pulled out one of the energy bars he always had on hand. Approaching her with caution, he extended it to her. He knelt down and held out the bar to her. She stared at him curiously, as if she were trying to figure out how to eat it. She accepted his offer a second time and eagerly ate every last bite, her gaze fixed on him the whole time. As John retrieved another bar from his pocket, he anticipated her request for additional. She instead grinned appreciatively at him. John felt a long dormant part of his heart awakened when that tiny smile shone like a Christmas tree across her face. Their immediate connection, expressed through mutual understanding, transcended language, geography, and history barriers. There was no escaping its electric and magnetic pull. Because of the girl's predicament, John felt driven to take action. She was unique among the many abandoned children he had seen in the slums. All of them were starving and living in poverty. Inquisitive about her family, he sought Yul's advice, who then sought the opinion of the townspeople. John was virtually paralyzed with shock when he realized the small child was completely alone. He just couldn't see how a helpless little kid could make it through the world. Someone or some family must have been able to take care of her. Unfortunately, Yul explained that nobody was there by shaking his head. She probably received a short period of care from her mother before she died or left with someone who didn't want a child. It was a sad truth of life in the slums, Yul said. John slept poorly that night. What could he do to help the girl? His mind raced with ideas. The thought of taking her in as his own blossomed like a fragile flower in his mind. He sought Yul's assistance the following morning to initiate the adoption procedure. But it soon became clear that it would not be a picnic. John paid a visit to the orphanage where he had deposited the girl, now named Aaliyah. After a day of trying to navigate the adoption process's bureaucratic red tape, their first meeting was less than 2 weeks ago. Yet Aaliyah still leaped into his arms the moment she saw him, her expression one of pure delight. The smile landed on John's face as well. It had been the correct choice to take her to the shelter for abandoned children. She was clean now, with her head shaved, and her hair was beginning to grow back. She enthusiastically led him around the orphanage, her eyes sparkling with a renewed vitality as she swung his big hand in her little one. The discovery of the common room television, running water from the tap, light from the windows. And much more was something she was thrilled to show him. These mundane things, which most people take for granted, were wonders to her. And John couldn't help but be amazed. John had always taken things for granted, but Aaliyah had them all her own. An orphanage caregiver took great pride in an exercise book that contained the alphabet and handwriting that they proudly presented during their visits. After only 1 week of practice, Aaliyah could recite them with ease. John felt an overwhelming surge of patriotic pride, which made him anxious to brag about his daughter's emerging brilliance. Still, he reaffirmed his resolve to see it through by reminding himself that he had not yet become her legal father. He would not risk Aaliyah's potential if he wasted her. John discussed the possibility of speeding up the adoption with Yule. Among Yule's recommendations, the one that really struck a chord with John was to bring a life-sized photograph of the district's natural beauty to the district chief's office together with other presents in order to curry favor. After seeing corruption in Somalia with his own eyes, John came up with a strategy instead of just paying the huge amount of money that was asked. In order to help Aaliyah's orphanage run smoothly, he decided to donate a set amount every month. He also made arrangements for reliable supervision to prevent the monies from being exploited for personal benefit. He felt calm after implementing this plan. A few calls were made on John's behalf by the chief, whose attitude was softened by his presence. As a result of this surgery, John was able to adopt Aaliyah without delay. The apparent simplicity of the task astounded him. Upon his return to the United States, John made arrangements for Aaliyah to have a female nanny, a housekeeper, and a tutor through a respectable agency. But Aaliyah wanted to be near John. He couldn't escape her grasp when she relentlessly pursued him throughout his study, bedroom, and living area. With a smile and an embrace, she would greet him every time she saw him, as if to cherish the moment. Her eyes closed, John came to the realization that they had both been lost and lonely before they met in these shared times. In their different ways, they were each looking for love and friendship. Every time John veered off into his thoughts, Aaliyah would snap him out of it. They created a strong father-daughter bond and innumerable wonderful memories together. John cut back on his travel significantly to raise Aaliyah, and he was surprised to discover that he didn't miss it much. In his travels, he made sure to coincide with Aaliyah's holidays so they could enjoy exploring together. John was captivated by her, and he painstakingly documented her development through photographs, turning their lives together into a visual journal. Anyone lucky enough to stumble into the album was profoundly impacted by the story conveyed through the photographs, which chronicled nearly every day since she entered his life. John desired to commemorate Aaliyah's birthday with an unusual event. 20 years subsequent to their adoption, he caught her off guard by presenting an exhibition called The Best of Me. Viewing photographs documenting her entire existence, including every time spent with her dad, brought tears to Aaliyah's eyes. She promised he would always be proud of her when she embraced him warmly. "You always have," John said with genuine emotion. "Daughter, you are loved by me." Visitors were moved by the show since it gave them a unique opportunity to see John's private life. John turned down offers from wealthy benefactors who wanted to buy the collection. Rather, he established a permanent home for the collection in the gallery he had run since becoming Aaliyah's father. Anyone could come and see the display, and it gave people hope and inspiration. From being a starving, lonely child to a stunning, sophisticated, and ambitious young woman, Aaliyah went through an incredible metamorphosis. She was extraordinarily intelligent for her age. And she went on to have a prosperous modeling career, clothing line, and foundation that helped orphans. She aspired to make sure that more children got the education and attention they needed by expanding the foundation worldwide. She had already paid for the college tuition of a large number of disadvantaged kids by the time she was 22 years old. It was disheartening to think that Aaliyah's lovely aspirations and ambitions may have been dashed if she hadn't been adopted. Her influence on society was immense. May Aaliyah be showered with every blessing and opportunity that life has to offer.
After watching the first story above, do you have any thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Now, let's watch another similar story. As Officer Caleb went about his routine patrol, something out of the ordinary caught his eye. Somewhere in the middle of the blossoms stood a little girl. Just 3 words from her when he drew near were enough to make him summon reinforcements. Officer Caleb cautiously made his way through the busy streets on a bright afternoon, keeping an eye out for any potential danger. The only people making a fuss at this hour were kids who weren't in class because they were playing hooky. Even though he groaned at the idea, he stayed alert to make sure the area was peaceful. A quarrel broke out between 2 men when Caleb drove by the park, breaking the serenity. Parkgoers scattered as they traded insults and punches. Without thinking twice, Caleb stepped in to calm the situation by putting himself between the combatants. The tension dropped as soon as they recognized him as an officer, and Caleb started talking to them. The 2 brothers were having a normal argument, and Officer Caleb thought about making an arrest when they quickly made up. However, he decided against it after they apologized and reunited. As they left hand in hand, he warned them and then let them go. The unusual sight of the park's flowers quivering and the lack of a breeze drew his eye as he turned to return to his patrol car. Approaching with caution, he sensed something was wrong. Out of nowhere, a little girl, maybe no more than 6 years old, stepped from under the flower beds. With her eyes watering from the intense sunlight, she hurried over to Caleb and took hold of his hand. She shook Caleb to his core with her 3 words, "Please help me," which brought back a similar plea from a frantic bank heist years earlier, a number of years ago. In response to a bank heist, Jesse and Caleb engaged armed bandits who were attempting to flee with the money while simultaneously firing at the responding police. Jesse was shot during the pursuit, but before he passed away, he repeated the same plea, "Please help me." Caleb hastened his partner's journey to the hospital. When Caleb's colleague, Jesse, was wounded during a high-stakes bank heist, it was one of his lowest points as a police officer. It was a sobering illustration of the risks he was taking on at work. For a moment, Caleb thought about giving up completely. However, Caleb's feeling of purpose was revived when he saw Jesse in the hospital. Jesse's tenacity and dedication to finding criminals inspired Caleb. Jesse's encouragement to go back to the field, oblivious to Caleb's uncertainties, was profound. Caleb was no longer frightened and resolved to confront the difficulties head-on. Now, in the here and now, when the girl said those eerie words, "Please help me," it brought back memories of Jesse's scream and made Caleb more determined than before. His heart sank when he bowed low to meet hers, his gaze fixed on her terrified face. In her frantic embrace with him, her bruises, scrapes, and the absence of a sandal were all laid bare. Her demeanor gave the impression that she was fleeing from something, hiding in the flowers out of fear, even though she didn't seem lost. A black SUV with tinted windows was parked nearby as Caleb's gaze surveyed the area. He had the uneasy feeling that someone was watching them from inside. The girl's shrill scream was triggered by the sight of the SUV. With a tight grip on Caleb's hand, the girl dove behind him as the SUV accelerated and the engine revved suddenly. Caleb didn't waste any time getting his radio and quickly requested reinforcements, giving detailed information about the vehicle and its expected trajectory. "I couldn't abandon the defenseless child or put her in harm's way during a high-speed chase," he thought when he was about to join the pursuit. Upon noticing an additional cruiser being piloted by one of his subordinate officers, Caleb proceeded to flag it down. After making sure the girl had the medical attention she needed, he told the junior officer to bring her to the station. Dealt with that, Caleb returned to his police vehicle in a flash and began chasing the SUV. He anticipated the SUV's route by coordinating via his radio and using shortcuts wisely. The pursuit quickly became a trap as additional troops closed up on the SUV, stopping it in its tracks. Officers stepped out of their cars, weapons drawn, and told everyone inside to get out while raising their hands. A tense period ended, the doors of the SUV flung open and 3 men stepped out. They were quickly taken into custody and taken to the station. Inside, Caleb made the decision to begin his inquiry with Lily, the little girl, in an attempt to find out why she had been targeted by dangerous guys. Lily sobbed as she disclosed her name and the terrible news that her parents had died in an automobile accident, leaving her alone and exposed to those who were looking for her. In the midst of the chaos, Caleb was consoled to discover, moved by her situation, that she lived with her aunt. Caleb, who was desperate to have Lily back with her family, was taken by surprise. When he looked into her Aunt Laura, he found disturbing information, a criminal record that cast doubt on her competence to be Lily's guardian. By going farther, Caleb discovered startling details about Laura's background, including a worrisome link to a prior marriage. Pat was a domineering man who always sought to control Laura. Their marriage was not joyful. Laura maintained her independence and refused to bow to his demands in spite of his destructive behavior. Pat became more jealous of Laura since she was a successful real estate agent and frequently interacted with clients, earning large commissions that he erroneously believed would jeopardize their marriage. Even though Pat didn't work, he claimed Laura entertained men just to rile him up. When Laura learned with horror of her brother's tragic accident, things got worse. That evening, she made numerous miles-long drives to pick up Lily, who was just 2 years old, from the hospital. Fortunately, Lily was only slightly hurt. Laura's formal guardianship of Lily began with this event, and she has since put Lily's welfare above all else. Laura decided that she would not put Lily through Pat's destructive conduct any longer, so she started to confront him. Pat's hatred for Lily further grew since he believed that it was because of Lily that Laura was resisting him. Pat's paranoia grew as she worried Laura might go with Lily and threatened to do terrible things if she ever tried to flee. Laura took extraordinary measures to protect herself and Lily after feeling more and more endangered. Getting a firearm was a move she never thought she'd need to take. Laura had been hopeful that closing a big real estate deal would finance their flight, but then something horrifying happened. In a drunken frenzy one evening, Pat called and demanded they leave right away or he would kill them when he came back. Laura thought Pat had stolen her weapon, so she hurried to get it in a panic only to discover it was gone. Not wanting to linger, she quickly gathered necessities, snatched Lily, and left their house. However, the sudden appearance of police cruisers outside their home prevented them from making their getaway, citing substantial proof that Laura had murdered her client. The officers quickly placed Laura under arrest, supported by the recovered pistol and her jacket discovered at the crime scene. They pointed to texts from her phone scheduling an inspection of the property and the subsequent fatal shooting. Completely confused, Laura angrily denied any involvement, claiming it was an error. Perplexed by her escape with Lily if she was innocent, Laura's request went unanswered as she confronted an overwhelming legal struggle. Laura, who was sure Pat was the mastermind behind the plan, recognized in that desperate moment that she had been set up. The sad events that transpired were set in motion by his command for her to leave the house while Lily stayed with Laura's reliable acquaintance. Laura fought tenaciously to prove her innocence, but the overwhelming evidence resulted in a 25-year prison sentence for her. She felt betrayed by her last sight of Lily and that she had let her late brother down. Laura promised to never give up on her quest for freedom and a reunion with Lily. Even though she was imprisoned, she fought appeals year after year, unwavering in her declaration of innocence, but she didn't succeed until 6 years later. Now standing up for Lily, Laura's friend hired a new attorney, who found serious holes in the evidence against Laura. It was via this attorney that they learned the truth. Pat was the one who had framed Laura. Pat assumed the customer was Laura's lover and proceeded to take her weapon, send him texts from her phone, and even donned her jacket to the appointment. The customer's denial of any romantic involvement incited Pat's wrath, which ultimately led to a deadly confrontation in which Pat shot and killed the client. He failed to grasp the seriousness of his conduct until after it had happened. He made sure his fingerprints were removed from the weapon before leaving it and his wife's jacket at the scene of the crime in order to implicate Laura. he threatened her in a premeditated phone hours later. His master plan came to fruition when she freaked out and dashed headfirst into the arms of the authorities. This new development completely flipped the case on its head. Rapid action led to Pat's arrest, and a new trial was held for Laura. It took months before she was found not guilty. In Laura's life, the happiest day came on the day she saw Lily again. Laura felt a pang of melancholy for the time she had missed because Lily had matured so much during her 4 years behind bars. She was now 6 years old. Laura, though, swore that from that point on, she would treasure her niece's company. The story of the girl and her aunt brought tears to Caleb's eyes as he read about the hardships they had to face. Laura, who had rushed to the station in a state of fear, was contacted instantly by him. Curiously, they clung to each other in an embrace. Laura shared that she was concentrating on building a relationship with Lily after her recent release from prison. Tragically, Lily went missing from a restaurant while Laura was preoccupied with paying, ruining their outing. The men in the SUV abducted Lily, as far as Caleb could tell, since Laura lacked the means to pay the ransom. The motivation baffled Caleb. Caleb questioned the suspects with an obsessive desire to find out what happened. Once again that day, he uncovered some surprising information. The individuals belonged to an infamous gang that specialized in child adoptions. They weren't your average kidnappers. Through illegal means, they abducted children from one region and sold them for large sums to other regions, sometimes even abroad, preying on naive families who were anxious to start a family. They decided to go after Lily for this reason. Their plot was thwarted. Nevertheless, when they tried to kidnap another youngster at the park after collecting her from the restaurant, Lily took advantage of the situation, slipped free of their clutches, and dashed towards the oncoming police officer, causing the men to panic and run away. They were caught because Caleb chased them relentlessly. The inquiry uncovered 16 more individuals associated with the menacing cartel. Police raided their refuge early the following day, rescuing 7 additional youngsters. Caleb received praise for the way he handled the case, and the police achieved a major triumph. The idea that such activities may go undetected startled people. Amidst the applause, Caleb said that they were successful because of Lily's courage and promised to find the families of all the abducted children. After everything that Lily and her aunt had been through, Caleb became quite close to them. Laura was very grateful that Caleb, out of a desire to be there for them, spent more time with them. Despite everything, Lily took comfort in knowing she had a paternal figure. They hoped for a better future together. After watching the stories above, do you have any thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. If you enjoyed our video, please like, subscribe, and share our channel. That's all about today's stories. See you next time.